Hello, my name is David Ades. I am a certified professional life coach who specializes in recovery from narcissistic abuse. This video is a general roadmap of what narcissistic abuse is, what it is like. That will come first. And second, I'm going to talk about what the work of recovery looks like. So as time goes on, this video will become more tangible. You might walk away with some kind of practical insights of how to proceed. But first I'm going to start with a metaphor for what narcissistic abuse is like, what it's like to suffer the abuse, what it's like to survive the abuse, what it's like to begin recovery. In order to get to the recovery, first you've got to survive the narcissistic abuse, and not everybody does survive. Surviving is like you've finally broken out of an insane asylum that, and I'm going to use a metaphor, obviously, I'm beginning to use a metaphor, but it's not hyperbole. I'm not exaggerating. Surviving narcissistic abuse is breaking out, finally, escaping an insane asylum that you lost yourself in. You were mistakenly confined, sent to an insane asylum. That's what a relationship with a narcissist is. You were mistakenly sent and confined to an insane asylum, and the main doctor of the insane asylum, that's a metaphor for the narcissist, brainwashed you, made you forget who you are. Finally, you survive this experience, you break out, you don't remember who you are. Continuation of the metaphor. The clues to who you are scattered across the city that you've kind of escaped back into the real world, so to speak, to some extent. And what I mean is, though you might be out of the physical insane asylum, though you might have gained some distance from the narcissist, they're so present in your mind. Now the insane asylum has left such an impression on you, and the narcissist has kind of successfully brainwashed you, such that your journey to remembering who you are and purging the narcissist and the hauntings of the insane asylum from your mind are about just as harrowing and arduous a task as escaping the insane asylum itself was. As hard as it is to get out of the insane asylum, that's about as hard as it is going to be to put yourself back together. So, getting back to the metaphor, you escape the insane asylum, clues to who you are scattered around reality, around the city that this metaphorical insane asylum is in, and you're left with this Harry Potter kind of situation, where Harry Potter has this scar on his forehead, and whenever Voldemort is near, it kind of overwhelms him with it looks like he's having traumas flood his consciousness. It's very painful. However, facing Voldemort, Voldemort represents precisely the fear that Harry Potter has to face. This is the predicament for someone who survives narcissistic abuse. You're left with multiple scars, let's say, kind of Harry Potter type scars, that the closer you get to reclaiming pieces of yourself that were forgotten during your stay at the insane asylum, during your time with a narcissist, the closer you get to pieces of yourself that you need to reclaim, the more the scar is going to hurt. You're going to be flooded by precisely the then traumatic feelings and experiences that severed you from that part of you to begin with. And I'm going to repeat what I just said. First, I want to emphasize that, of course, this is what it's like to recover from trauma. Of course, the traumatic experience, the traumatic feeling that overwhelmed your psyche, your body, your system, to such an extent that it split off a piece of yourself, repressed a part of your personality that now you have to go reclaim. Of course, reclaiming that part of yourself includes, it is the now processing of what you couldn't process at the time. In order to get a piece of you back that's repressed due to trauma, you've got to go through the experience or the feeling that is the barrier between you and that piece of you. That's the trauma. You've got to process the pain that you couldn't process. To begin with, you have to face the fear that you couldn't face during your stay at the insane asylum. Harry Potter remains quite an apt metaphor here, because Harry Potter gets his scar when he's a baby, when he's defenseless. Only when he gets older, now he's stronger, he has more ego strength, which is a positive thing in psychology, now he can face the kind of narcissistic abuser found in Voldemort. Now he's strong enough to withstand the pain and face the fear, where when he was a kid, he just didn't have that option. He lacked the integrity about his personality. He lacked the ego strength. It wasn't safe for him. He hadn't developed his, the structures of his psyche and the integrity of his nervous system and stuff like that. It just wasn't. Now it's time to process this stuff. So, now we start getting to what the work looks like. You've broken out of this insane asylum. You're aware you need to recover yourself. Pieces of yourself are scattered here and there. There are a few difficulties. First and foremost, the pieces of yourself are behind a lot of pain. Now, through the narcissistic abuse, you probably developed coping strategies to numb pain, or to escape, or to avoid, or to deny. You probably also developed pretty maladaptive defense mechanisms, patterns and habits of protecting yourself from the pain. Here lies a deterrent from retrieving pieces of yourself. In order to get to the pieces of yourself again, you have to go through the pain that at the time you just couldn't take, which is why it ended up in trauma, which is why that part of yourself is behind this kind of dissociative wall. You don't remember yourself. You can't get to yourself. You're not in touch with yourself. Now you have to go through this pain. So the first deterrent, the first obstacle on the journey of recovering from narcissistic abuse is the pain itself. You try to remember yourself, and then this scar starts to hurt. No wonder it's difficult. You say, I don't like that. I don't want to do it. Why would I want to do that? Can't I just float around without being fully remembered? Can't I float around with as much of myself as I have left? Do I still have to go through challenges and pain, more of it? I just got out of the insane asylum. Aren't I good now? So the first deterrent is the pain itself and the coping strategies that you use to suppress the pain, or maybe even kind of feed into it in a destructive way. The compulsive behaviors that help you suppress or get away from the pain, kind of same thing as coping strategies, and the defense mechanisms that kind of guide you away from the pain. And of course, things guide you away from the pain. You're built to be guided away from pain. So that's what makes this work not only so difficult, but so confusing. It's almost like you need to go back to the insane asylum and collect yourself. But why the hell would you ever go back to the insane asylum? I'll go over this stuff more and more throughout more of my videos, but that's enough of metaphoric usage for this video. Continue with the practical stuff, the tangible stuff. That's what the people want. So the first deterrent is the pain itself. I'm going to get into kind of how you work through these challenges after I name a few of them. The second one is the inner critic. That's like an echo of the doctor from the insane asylum. It's an echo of the narcissist that lives in your mind, obviously trying to convince you to not go find pieces of yourself. So you've got, on the one hand, your natural, I don't want to feel pain thing. That is natural. It's good to have that. Second, you've got the inner critic trying to make sure that you don't reclaim pieces of yourself, that you remain a kind of brainwashed zombie slave of the narcissistic abuser. And third, you got to give me a second. Oh, maybe that was it. Maybe I combined the raw pain and the defense mechanisms. That's what I was going to name third, but I combined those into one. So you've got quite a heap, a mountain of garbage. You're trying to get to yourself underneath a mountain of garbage. And you just throw, it's this empty can, and then it's this piece of junk, and then it's this dirty thing, and then it's this bad memory, and then so where am I? Meanwhile, you don't know if you can trust anybody, right? In this metaphor of you've broken out of the insane asylum, so I'm going back on enough metaphoric usage. You've broken out of the insane asylum. You can't really ask people like, hey, do you know where I could find myself? And do you know? Because they don't know. They don't know who you are, what you're coming to the table with, where you've been, what's happened to you. Nobody can see it on you. That a narcissist, what happens when you're in a relationship with a narcissist, they're literally brainwashing you. This is not a metaphor. It's not an exaggeration. They're trying to silence the electrical activity of your brain and replace it with the electrical activity of their brain. You're supposed to think for them. You're supposed to emote for them. You're supposed to be a vessel. They're trying to carve you out and put themselves into you so that you're like a copy of them. And so, recovering from narcissistic abuse is like you're trying to throw up the leftover sickness that the narcissistic virus represents. It gets into you, and it's you know what a virus does? It kind of tries to take over host cells. The narcissist is trying to find a host in you, and this is very harrowing, confusing stuff. So now to the practical stuff. It begins with pain, a certain kind of pain, being like the North Star. You're supposed to follow the painful calls of your inner child, the suffocated voice of your inner voice. This entombed, is that the right entombed? Embalmed part of you. The narcissist embalms your essence, entombs your inner voice, encases your true self, your essence. And now you've broken out of the insane asylum, you got to listen for this very in pain part of you and follow. So I want to say a specific sort of pain that I can't kind of help you understand through a video because I might, I don't know exactly who I'm speaking with at the moment. It's particular to your experience. The reason I emphasize it's a particular kind of pain is you can't just put yourself through pain and then recover like who you were. So a kind of crazy example of this is the alpha discipline side of the internet that encourages people to do just like very painful things in hopes that that will just strengthen them magically because no pain, no gain. It's like, yes, but if the pain that you're going through isn't relevant to your story or who you are or to your goals, then it might just be pain that you're putting yourself through for no reason. In any case, recovering from narcissistic abuse, getting pieces of yourself back to you, have a lot to do with following the relevant, meaningful part of your story, painful calls of your inner voice. And there is a lot of subtle tuning your senses back to yourself. So, the first kind of tangible work is learning to open your arms to what might come across as very painful experiences. Being triggered, for example. Being triggered is like a volcano of unconscious material, subconscious material, repressed material, explodes. Now you're faced with all this stuff, maybe memories or old feelings or stuff you didn't even know that you had going on in your psyche. You've got to open your arms to those sorts of experiences. It's like, this is you. But then again, some discernment comes in because you can't just go get yourself triggered by everybody and think that you're going to recover. You might be being re-traumatized instead of kind of simply, although it's not a simple thing, triggered. So, it's a particular sort of pain to kind of work your way into a relationship with. More subtlety about yourself, a more quiet mind, more openness, less lights and sounds, less loudness, which means less coping strategies, less defense mechanisms, and less compulsive behaviors. You need to leave more room for what's really going on down there, even though what's really going on down there might speak to pain and unpleasant things. The second, moving on from dealing with the pain as kind of a North Star, I suppose I could put it as you've got to identify the North Star of your pain. It's the North Star of your essence, but your essence kind of happens to be in pain as a result from narcissistic abuse, or it happens to be associated with pain, or behind a barrier of pain. As the narcissist teaches you, you're not allowed to be yourself. Cage your essence. Punish your essence. Shunt your essence. Banish it. Damn it. Condemn it. It's blasphemous. So moving on from the raw pain, it's inner critic work, discerning the narcissist's voice from the voice of your true self. This is a kind of specific type of work. This is something we might address in coaching. Something you need to know about the inner critic is it works through both thoughts and emotions. You can experience thoughts in the head that belong to the inner critic. You can experience emotions, which are kind of the other side of thoughts, like the bodily component of thoughts. You can experience emotions that actually aren't yours. They belong to the inner critic. The inner critic is an object in your psyche that repeats messaging from people who you were meaningfully connected to, whether that's positive or negative. And in this case, recovering from narcissistic abuse, it's quite negative. The narcissist carves out such a home for itself, for him or herself, the narcissist. The narcissist carves out a home for him or herself, jumps in your mind, becomes the inner critic. Now you don't know. Is it me or is it them? And who do I follow? And who do I listen to? Blah, blah, blah. Inner critic discernment. Then moving to, as opposed to what I said with number one, like the raw pain and making space by not engaging in compulsive behaviors, so on and so forth. Number three is using your coping mechanisms, using your defensive maneuvers, using things that trigger you, using dream material, using symptoms you experience, using them as traces, how do you say, like signifiers. Oh, follow this breadcrumb trail. Follow the breadcrumb trail of the resistances in your psyche or in your body, right? What you find yourself spontaneously resisting. But again, it's a specific sort of resistance because you can't just willy-nilly do everything that you resist doing and then you're going to heal from that. There's no shortcutting the nuance and complexity of the work of recovering from trauma because it came with a lot of nuance and complexity, like the psyche and what it's doing to protect you and the moment and all of the connections to memory and emotion, and it's really an intricate web, and there's no way of kind of bullheading your way through this stuff. So, noting the symptoms and trying to follow them like a breadcrumb trail. Noting the coping strategies, noting the defense mechanisms when they're making themselves known. You get the idea. Noting dream imagery, and this is the type of stuff that we might do in coaching as well. Because, I can say this a few different ways, the pieces of yourself you're trying to reclaim are, within the symptom. Beyond the defense mechanism. In the underneath, I already used enough. I don't know what those prepositional... Are they prepositions? Within, beyond, in... There are pieces of you, it's like you kind of have to play detective. You're trying to track yourself down amongst a lot of false evidence and blah, blah, blah. The last thing I want to mention is how personal this work is. Again, nobody can see like the consequences of narcissistic abuse. It's very personal to you. It can feel very lonely or very alone, like, nobody understands, and to offer some understanding in that regard, it's more or less true that nobody understands narcissism in general. You don't know what it's like until you know what it's like, and then it's kind of too late. In my experience, there aren't too many, at least public-facing intellectuals who really have a grasp on narcissism. That's because they're impossible to grasp. And that's kind of not a joke. That's why I took a moment for it. And the consequences of narcissistic abuse, therefore, are, kind of just as elusive. One becomes so elusive to oneself that it really is a journey of recovery. So, that's it for this video. If you have any questions, any topics you'd like to recommend that I make a video about that pertain to narcissistic abuse and the recovery from it, please leave it in the comments below. If you want to work with me personally, click the first link in the description to schedule a free discovery call with me. You can first read about my coaching at my website, coachdavidades.com. And that's it. Like the video if you like it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will talk to you soon.